Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're joining us. Today, we have Timmy Gibson. And Timmy is a former evangelical pastor here in Kansas City. Yeah. Our paths crossed maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And Timmy was actually the first guy to interview me after my meltdown fall from grace. Yeah. And he quizzed me on theological beliefs for 2 hours. Yeah. So he's a fellow podcaster, fellow former evangelical pastor. So we both share that in common. And yeah, has a fun story. So I wanted to get him on here, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, you bet. Let's start. I always like to get backstory, kind of the origin stories. And yours is fun because it crossed, we realized that it brought us together in a funny sort of way through our friendship with Adam Hamilton. Yeah. So after you'd done my interview, just to tell people, I got a call from you one day, and you were going, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast with Adam Hamilton?" And I was like, "Well, sure, but how do you know Adam Hamilton?"
Yeah.
So your backstory.
Yeah. I grew up with him.
Kind of explain that.
Yeah.
So, but tell us, where you were born, growing up, what your faith system was, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Grew up in Kansas City. Been here all my life. Lived in pretty much Johnson County most all of my life. Going to Assembly of God Pentecostal Church back in the day. And upon graduating high school, felt the call into ministry. And that was like the highest call. I mean, you could be a doctor, a lawyer, or a politician, or you could really do something great and be a pastor. And anyway, felt that leading and went off to seminary, Central Bible College in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
But before that, to go back just a little bit further, and when I was in junior high, I went to a little church out in Stanley, Kansas called Faith Chapel, which is where I met Adam and LaVon. And they weren't married yet at that time, and he was a youth leader in the youth group that I was a part of. And my dad and mom used to hang out with Adam and LaVon, and they were in Bible things together and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I go way back with Adam. And then lost track, he graduated and went off and did his thing, and then I went off and did my thing. And then
you went to Central Bible College.
Central Bible College.
Did you graduate from there?
No, just 2 years, and then left there, went down to Rhema Bible College down in Tulsa. So then I got amongst the charismatic Word of Faith, name it, claim it bunch.
Right.
And graduated from Rhema.
Okay.
And then moved back to Kansas City.
I had a roommate at Baylor that graduated from Baylor and then went to Rhema.
Huh.
Because we had gotten into this sort of charismatic Baptist church when we were Baptist kids at Baylor. So he was convinced that Kenneth Hagin was God's prophet on the planet, and that if I didn't follow Kenneth Hagin, that it could have dire consequences in the afterlife for me.
Yeah, and there was a vibe of that. I mean, it was definitely very driven.
I was like,
in that way.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's funny. I look back to that now as a agnostic, and I would maybe say I'm a spiritual agnostic because I still love Jesus. I just don't believe you have to believe in Jesus to have a good afterlife or whatever. But when I first got to campus and they first had chapel at Rhema, I remember really struggling. Just the charismatic, over the top vibe, and then the prophet, Kenneth Hagin, just the worship of him, felt very odd.
They wouldn't say that.
No, they wouldn't say that, but it was definitely, there was a vibe of whatever he says is gospel.
Yeah.
It's
well, and he's funny. He's a funny storyteller.
He's a great storyteller.
He's got this homespun
Southern drawl
feel to it.
Yeah.
One day I was playing on a creek bank.
Yeah.
And
Jesus appeared to me in a vision. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. No, he's very like Grandpa telling you a great story of when he saw Jesus.
Yeah.
And the thing about it was then you either believed it and were in line. Mm-hmm. That was it. That was really the only option. I mean, if you didn't believe it, then you weren't really listening to the voice of the Lord.
Yeah. Well, I had never been around anybody that had seen Jesus more times, nor had Jesus like speak directly to him and explain the Bible to him and do all these things, It was just like, wow, this is, I didn't know what to think when I was first getting introduced to all of that, because I was a Baptist kid first.
Right. Yeah.
At any rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after Rhema, what did you do?
So after Rhema, I was employed at a few churches here and there, one in Alabama, and then I moved out of there and went to Conroe, Texas, actually Houston, Texas area. It was actually a really good church. I was still very charismatic, but the pastor used to work with Joel Osteen at Lakewood Church, that little church down there in Houston.
His dad started that.
Yeah, John Osteen started it, and his son Joel Osteen worked in the TV department. And then the pastor that I worked for worked alongside him with the singles group down in Houston.
So I worked in a church. This is another little connection point. 2 summers while I was kind of going through seminary. So I graduated Baylor, then I was at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. 2 summers I worked at Oak Ridge Baptist Church right on I-45, right by the Woodlands.
Yes.
So
I lived in the Woodlands.
Yeah. So, and I would stay in homes in the Woodlands while I was there because people would leave, and like I remember staying in these beautiful homes in the Woodlands for the summer.
Yeah.
Sometimes. But yeah, like little Spring, Texas was just a little.
Yep. Yeah, I lived in Spring, Texas for a while.
I got introduced to playing 42 dominoes and Bluebell ice cream.
That's great. Yeah, no, I lived in Spring and also lived in the Woodlands, and then I worked in Conroe.
You remember that little ice cream store down by the railroad track in Spring?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. Just to the east.
And I think they served Bluebell, didn't they?
Yeah.
Holy crud. Yeah,
that's crazy.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So then I worked there for a while. Then in 2002, moved back here to Kansas City to plant a church. First, in the beginning, it was named Olathe Life Fellowship, and there was another church that had a similar name, so we changed it to Olathe Life Church, and then we changed it again to Mercy Church, and pastored that church, till 2018, 2019 is when I eventually I just had to shut it down. Just my theology had changed so drastically. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't. You said this earlier that you teach the things that you're passionate about. And for me, that's what I did. I just really stuck with the words of Jesus and things that give, love and kindness and mercy and grace and forgiveness. I just really stuck on those. And then I just got to the point where I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And then I had gone through a divorce in 2019. And so that was, heavy on my heart too. And I really wanted to have no pressure, no responsibilities, and, get into some counseling, just kind of work through some of my struggles and stuff. And so I'm curious, so we're both church planters too, so we have a lot of connection there. But how did you start, how did you initially start the church? How did you get 10 people or 20 people or 30 people? We phone call in the beginning. It was, calling the people that I knew and just said, hey, I'm going to start a church. Were you interested in being a part of the leadership team? And so we started with 10 people.
Okay.
And then we did the classic, because we were a part of an organization back then that kind of helped seed us with ideas and different things.
This was like a Pentecostal group?
Yeah, it's called the ARC. It's ARC, Association of Related Churches.
I've heard of that.
Chris Hodges. It was associated with Bethel down in Louisiana, and what's his name? Dino Rizzo, who was down in Baton Rouge area. Okay. Actually, he was the youth pastor for Jamie Swaggart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was in kind of that group, and Greg Surratt and some other folks. So I got some seed money from them to help. And so we did advertising, we did door hangers, we did a mailer. We did all that kind of stuff, like church coming soon, different than all other churches. And so our first service, I think our first service, we maybe had just under 100 people, maybe 60, 70 people at the first service, and then just slowly grew. We got to about 300 people.
Where were you meeting at? Did you
high school, Olathe South High School?
High school, that whole.
We started in a junior high auditorium because it was like sat 250.
Okay.
And then once we started running 250, it just felt it was too much. And so we moved right next door to the high school auditorium, which I'll be honest, that was 1,000-seat auditorium. And so it only looked great on Easter. Easter, we'd, as you know, triple your crowd. So we'd go from 300 to 600, 700 people, and it was fantastic. So
were you doing rock and roll Christian worship kind of stuff?
Yeah, Hillsong, United type stuff. Yeah,
you're
very
a musician,
progressive,
right?
Ish. I can sing.
Okay.
I can sing. I play a little guitar, but yeah, not very accomplished.
So how did you recruit your worship people?
Kids I grew up with in the church that Adam Hamilton and I went to. So that pastor, who's since passed, his name was Phil Hollis. Phil Hollis has 2 boys, Brandon and Jason Hollis. I called those 2 guys, and they're both very accomplished musicians. And so I called them and said, hey, I'm going to start a church. You interested in leading the worship part of it? And they said, yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
And so, and Brandon actually, he pastors a church down in Conway, Arkansas, I believe. I can't think of the name of the church, but
now he does?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's down pastoring down there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am curious. So you pastored this church 2002 to 2000, roughly 19. That's 17 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, we had a good run,
Pretty good run. And I don't think we crossed paths during that time.
No.
I started Vineyard in 1990 and pastored it until 2019.
Okay.
But we didn't.
Oh, wow, similar.
I started about 10 years earlier than you.
Yeah.
Adam and I started the same
So you and Adam started the same, okay.
Same year, yeah. He down south and me up north. So I'm curious, as you pastored this church, what were your biggest challenges, biggest frustrations, and then maybe what were your biggest joys? And then how did your faith and belief system start to fall apart? So that's 3 different questions.
Sure.
Okay, so maybe first one, what were some of your biggest challenges and struggles as you pastored that church for 17 years?
Sure, you'll relate to this.
Yeah.
2 things for me: finances and volunteerism. Like, those were the 2 biggest challenges. People talk about, sometimes pastors say it's so hard to come up with messages. Fred, I can talk. And I have lots of stuff going on in my head, and I'm a reader, a pretty avid reader. So I was constantly reading. So I never, ever struggled with messages. I just didn't. I never struggled. And I watched a lot of other preachers. So I was just inundated. I literally had more stuff than I could ever preach, honestly. Right. But yeah, money, because I hated talking about it. I hated it. I just wanted it to just come in. I didn't want to have to talk about it. I didn't want to do campaigns. I didn't want to manipulate. When I say hate, that's even mild. I despised it. I hated talking about money. Yeah. And that was frustrating because it's like, man, we got free donuts, free coffee, a great, music, a great service. Like, we're providing this great service. Like, come on, contribute to what we're doing here. We're not asking for a lot, but do something. And, we were very stereotypical in the sense of, I think it's 20% of the people provide for 80% of the, 80% of the people aren't giving. 20% do. And the loudest voices with the biggest complaints, they're never the ones giving. Right. And that's just true. That's just true.
Yeah, it's true.
And then the volunteer part, that wasn't as big of a struggle, but it was a struggle in the kids department. And it was a struggle to find what I would consider like super quality, qualified children's workers. For music, though, we just didn't struggle there either. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm slightly a musician and it might have, I really give a lot of credit to my worship leader, who at the time, Brandon Hollis, super gifted, very gifted, just super talented. and a great guy, just a really good dude. But he was so talented that other talented musicians wanted to play.
Yeah.
That made a big difference. They were like, he's so good. Sure. We want to be on the team with him.
Right.
So that probably made all the difference in the world. So yeah, that was the biggest struggle.
Cool.
Money and volunteers.
Yeah. What about your joys? What would you say over that 17-year period of time? What did you enjoy the most about pastoring?
Teaching.
Okay.
I love teaching and talking and in the community. I did enjoy just sharing and all of that stuff together. Hence the why, even as an agnostic, I still go to church. I go to Adam Hamilton's church. I go to Church of the Resurrection downtown. So I still go to church, but only for community, because I don't believe a lot of the stuff, but I believe in community and I believe in goodness and kindness and, generosity. And so that resonates.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. And then, so then at some point you're pastoring, the church is, at least you're making a living and people are getting blessed. Probably you're baptizing people.
Oh, yeah.
People are getting saved and all that. Their lives are being changed for good, probably, right?
Yeah.
And all because you start this church, and at some point your belief system started to crack, shift.
Yes.
Was it slow and gradual?
It was because I've always had questions, but I was in an environment that really didn't allow for questions. So those questions were kind of just always rumbling just underneath the surface. And when I'm out on my own and I'm pastoring, I'm reading. So I'm reading a lot of books, and I'm not just reading Christian books. Like, I'm just an avid reader. I love reading. And I would just read things.
Everything.
Yeah, I read everything, and I don't always read. I don't just stick with what, I wouldn't say I watch only Fox. Like, I would watch CNN, Fox, MSNBC, which I don't even like news. But if I did, I like to hear what everybody's saying, not just, I love this, and stick with it. So I was reading books that were atheistic books or whatever. Anyway, and the big thing for me was the LGBTQ plus community. That was a community that I had friends in and close friends in. And I was an early adopter for same-sex marriage, in support of it. I could not understand why Christians were so against that community. And I just didn't align with that. I just didn't align with the fundamental evangelical view that, you can be gay, it's okay, but you just can't act on those feelings. Like, that's so ignorant. That'd be like telling a person that's heterosexual, listen, I know you like women, Fred, but you just can't ever do it and never be with them. You got to be with a man. Like, what? I don't like men like in that way. I only like women. And so it just graded me wrong. And so I'll never forget, this was a turning point in my life and the church's life. Back in 2005 to 8, somewhere in there, I did a sermon and it went viral, and it was called God Loves Gays. And at the same time, we were taking a group of 20 people going out to Topeka and to the Westboro Baptist Church. Yeah, we were picketing them, saying God loves gays. So we were directly opposing that message of hate.
Wow. Did they come picket you?
Oh, yeah. They came out and screamed at us. And it was crazy.
I had them come to my church once.
Yeah.
Which I kind of thought was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Oddly, they never came to my church.
Oh, okay.
I was hoping that they would. I was like, come on, bring it on. Let's do it. But so they didn't come to us. We went to them. And so that was the biggest turning point, I think. And that's when the church made a huge shift. We started to lose a lot of that fundamental evangelical crowd, the inerrancy of the Bible and all that stuff, which I don't believe in. I started weeding those people out because I was just becoming a little bit more liberal in my theology. And the more liberal I became in my theology, it was just driving a wedge between those that were, like I say, with that thought, and those that were not with that thought. And so the church really struggled, and we'd lose a bunch of people, but then we would gain a bunch of people that were more liberal and like, man, we like this guy, he's preaching honestly and authentically, and he's struggling with these hard issues and these hard questions. Some people really loved that.
Okay.
Some people thought I was leaving the faith and I was a heretic. And
right. Yeah.
And I was finding more and more joy and peace. That's what's crazy, Fred. I have more joy and more peace in my life now than I've ever had in my life. And I can't really fully explain it except that I'm more integrated with what I believe. In other words, how I live and what I believe are the same. I don't have like these secret things. It's like, no, I live very openly and honestly. I have no shame, no guilt. I dealt with all that. I went to counseling. I worked through all that religious guilt and shame. And now this is who I am, and this is how I live, and this is what I believe. I don't care what you think. You know, I respect whatever you believe, but I don't, maybe I share some of it, I don't care, you know, and that has been so freeing for me, for my soul. Yeah.
So the LGBTQ thing,
that was the start,
sort of the beginning of it.
Yeah. And then the inerrancy of God's word, you know, some of those things that just slowly, but surely, then I was like, wait a minute, maybe Jonah wasn't actually swallowed by a real fish and lived in the belly of that fish for 3 days. So yeah, it was very gradual.
Okay.
That I then now came to where I'm at.
What year did you start embracing the LGBTQ community?
2005, 6, 7, around in there.
Okay.
Might have been, yeah, right around in there.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting for me. I always had LGBTQ people coming to my church.
Yeah.
I always welcomed them. I
could they serve?
Oh, they could serve, and
awesome.
they could even be in some leadership positions.
Okay.
But the movement that I was in was not affirming. Okay. So you couldn't do a gay wedding and stay in the movement, and then basically, you know, you could have been on the worship team, you could have done all kinds of things.
Okay.
But you wouldn't have been able to be a pastor and been in an openly gay relationship.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So while I was welcoming, always had folks there, always graciously listened to their stories, we still weren't, you know, fully affirming.
Yeah.
But if I preached on the topic, if it ran across it, I would always think like, well, these would be the people that Jesus would be hanging out
Absolutely.
with, right? I mean, like the marginalized, you know, people on the edges, you know, those kind of things. That seems like that's who Jesus would hang out with. So in my mind, that was how we had to play that. Now I got down right before I went to rehab. I had a gal who came as a man, who transitioned as a woman, spent a lot of time with her, trans woman.
Yeah.
And then she fell in love with a woman, and she wanted to get married and wanted me to do the wedding. And so, like, she hadn't transitioned fully.
Yeah.
So chromosomally, she's still a guy, and she wants to marry a girl.
Right.
But if I did the wedding, it's going to look like a lesbian wedding.
Right.
So I ran it up the flagpole with the people in my movement that were, you know, would maybe kick me out or not.
Yeah.
And I was going, here's the situation. Here's what and I was committed to do it.
Yeah.
And they were like, they went back and they got back and they said, we don't know what to tell you.
Hopefully you did it. Did you do it? Hopefully?
Well, so I was going to.
Yeah. Oh, good.
And I was preparing my staff, you know, because I thought we might get some kickback. But then they broke up.
Huh.
And then I went to rehab, and then so I haven't had to really deal with it since. But
I do a lot of LGBTQ plus weddings.
Yeah.
A lot. So
yeah, and so some of those some folks in that crowd have been so kind and loving toward me.
Yeah. With
all that I've gone through, and I would always be fully affirming of that community. And I think you know, there's ways to use the Bible that I actually think is damaging and hurtful.
Absolutely.
And there's ways I think that we can still use the Bible that are super helpful and loving and compassionate.
And encouraging, sure.
Yeah. But let's talk about that a little bit, because your congregation, even though you'd lose people, you'd gain some people, but overall it started declining.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
and the giving started declining.
Okay.
Here's what I've learned. Right-wing fundamental like conservative people seem to be the ones that are primary givers.
And,
at least in the
guilty Catholics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, money started.
Conservative right-wing Catholics, conservative right-wing evangelicals give more.
Yes, it sure seems like
true.
it. Yeah. That was my experience.
Pretty sure that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, the decline started.
Yeah.
And then my own personal just spiritual struggle of, man, do I believe this? What it started. Was
your wife at the time on board with you?
Yeah, my ex-wife, the wife at the time, now ex. Yeah, she was pretty. She wasn't raised in church, so she was definitely more open to a lot of that, and honestly, she never understood what the problem would like. So they're gay, we're heterosexual. What does it even matter? And so she was pretty, fully. I would say she was fully on board with all of it. Yeah.
And there's like 6 verses in the whole Bible that kind of make you think, it's a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so what, after the LGBTQ thing, then what was there a sequence to the things that you started questioning, or did it all just come under doubt?
Yeah, it started all coming under doubt. And there were certain things that didn't match up evidentially, like with evidence, that God hears our prayers. It's like, well, like sometimes you pray and it seems to go that way, and sometimes you don't pray, or you pray and it goes the other way. You ask for the job, you don't get it, and sometimes you ask for the job and you do get it. Like, it was just very random. And I remember I read a book by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he said that if there was a God that was listening to our prayers, then there would be evidence of that, meaning a Christian's life would be evidentially better. And 9/11 would have only killed non-Christians. And, there's just, and all the, the daycare that was in the basement of the, like the Christian parents' kids would have survived, like, because they're the ones praying for their kids. And I just, it just made me look back over my life and go, yeah, there's no real evidence that my prayers are being heard. So I just didn't see that it was legit. Mm-hmm. And ironically, I still pray, but I pray for different reasons. I pray for my own, like I'm journaling, to hear my own thoughts, or to get myself aligned with whatever I'm praying for. Yeah, I do not believe that there's a God in heaven going, oh, Timmy, you want the Chiefs to win today? Well, I'll make that happen. I just, you know what I mean? I just don't. Yeah. There's no evidence of that. In my opinion, there's just zero evidence that there's a God that's moving.
They didn't pray hard enough last Sunday.
Yeah, right. Dear Lord. So then everything just became. I guess
we got to get Mahomes' prayer life going.
We got to get it right. We got
Super Bowl.
Everybody pray for Patrick Mahomes. And that's just I just as I looked at things honestly, and I started asking this question: what if it's not true? Or what if I'm wrong? I mean, is everything I'm taught accurate?
Yeah.
Is everything that I believe true? Just, there are some people that believe if they blow themselves up, they're going to get 70 virgins in heaven. Is that true? I mean, in a way, you can't disprove it. I don't know. I would say no, that it's not true, but I can't prove that it's not true. Mm-hmm. But they believe it they're so convinced that that's true, that they will blow themselves up. I'm not that committed. Right. I don't have that much belief.
So LGBTQ, prayer, what about science, evolution, dinosaurs?
I believe in all of that now. Yeah. I was taught the dinosaur bones were put here by the devil. Remember I talked about my podcast?
You told me that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they taught in this Pentecostal church I went to, is that dinosaur bones were literally put in the earth to deceive people. Like, that was the devil's plan.
So that was when you said that, like just 2 years ago or something, that was the first time I'd ever heard that perspective. Now, I had heard, so what's interesting is I had young earth people in my church.
Yeah.
Like, the earth is only, whatever, 6,000 years old or whatever,
Which is just ridiculous.
When God created it, he stuck all that stuff there. Like he made a mature earth with dinosaur bones already in the ground, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Yeah. And Adam and Eve, they were the first human beings, and, they just had sex with each other, and then their kids had sex with each other, and then that created the whole human race. And so I had people like that. But when I went to Baylor as a freshman, Baylor was actually a pretty liberal school theologically.
That's good.
It was Southern Baptist.
Yeah.
And so like my theology teachers were all super liberal.
Good.
And then I took a geology class, and the guy was a Christian, but he believed in an old earth.
Yeah.
And we went through all of the geological time frames from the beginning to up to today,
Yeah.
And it was really, and I loved science. I was always totally into science.
Yeah.
So already so it was interesting because I had gotten saved and I'd been doing drugs and stuff. So I was pretty sure Jesus was real. I got saved. I stopped doing drugs. God called me to be a pastor. And when my professors didn't even teach that Jesus literally resurrected from the dead.
Yeah.
They thought that was a myth.
Yeah.
My professors didn't even believe in real demons. They thought that was a myth.
Okay.
And I'm like going, well, I'm not sure, but I think I had a couple of demons,
Yeah.
And I might still, I'm not sure, But anyway, no, but I mean, I had enough doubts about the liberal stuff. And then I had this pretty profound experience that spun my life around.
Yeah.
So I ended up gravitating toward what I would call really smart, intellectual, progressive thinkers. They were still fairly conservative, but way more progressive. So they would integrate.
Yeah. More sophisticated, as they would say.
Yeah. Science with faith.
Yeah.
And I would say that's where I was at. I never taught a young earth when I started Vineyard in 1990.
Goodness gracious.
I always left options open, but I always believed in an old earth and an old universe, and I liked the idea of integrating all of that. And I thought Genesis was an ancient text. And if you tried to turn it into a modern 20th century science text, you screwed it all up.
Absolutely.
It was an ancient text. You needed to view it as an ancient text and see what they were saying in an ancient world.
Absolutely.
Then it makes way more sense anyway.
Right.
Well,
all the backflips and the twisty turns that I had to do to make sense of my young earth view and Adam and Eve being the first two. There were so many flaws and holes in that that it was ridiculous to the point where I finally let go of that. And like you said, as I opened myself up and engaged more in science and factual stuff and got away from the flat earth view, I realized, now this makes more sense to me. And that sounds derogatory, but that's how I view it. I view the young earth. We know it's not young. It is billions of years old. We know this now. Yeah. And so I couldn't hold on to a young earth perspective. And then the Adam and Eve, dear Lord, there's so many holes in that.
Right.
What do you do with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans and the Homo erectus? And it's like the evidence kept conflicting with my beliefs. That's what happened.
I mean, every one of the hard sciences show an old earth.
Absolutely.
You just take biology. You look at Francis Collins, who decoded the human genome and wrote a book called The Language of God.
And he's a Christian.
Yeah, and has a thing called biologos. He did a genetic sequencing that takes us right back to the chimpanzees.
Yes.
It's proven, it's in the DNA strand.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
us Homo sapiens have been around for some 200 to 300,000 years.
Yes. Yeah. And so, and there were types of humans, like you've pointed out, prior to that even.
Yeah.
So I've always loved that stuff. And, you take carbon dating, it's an old earth. You take any kind of thing, it's an old earth. You just take astronomy, you take biology, you take physics, you just go through all the sciences, and it points that way. But then you have this really rigid approach to a literal Bible, and everything's literal. And here's the thing that I've come to try to point to people is that nobody takes the Bible literally at every point.
No, they do not.
Nobody.
No. Especially the scholarly.
Not even, if you took the Orthodox Jewish community that tries to live the most conservative version of the Torah that you could possibly live.
Yeah.
they don't even do it all literally.
No.
And they'll argue over what they should and shouldn't do literally.
Yeah.
And if you take the most fundamentalist Baptist or fundamentalist evangelical or Pentecostal, they pick and choose all over the place in terms of what they actually take literally and what they don't.
Right.
And they typically have very little reasoning behind why they've picked out on some things literally and other things not.
Right.
Like in your tradition, could you have a woman preacher?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because some of your Pentecostal
not on staff as the senior pastor. Now, you could have someone that was over prayer or over volunteerism or with the children's department. But I grew up, I never heard a woman preach, except later as there was an evangelist woman that did come in, and I can't think of her name right now. It's skipping my mind. But there was one time I remember a woman evangelist came in.
Okay.
But she was working healing and miracles. And
Well, it's interesting because Vineyard was kind of, I would have called my church charismatic light.
Yeah.
And so like, it was interesting because sometimes I would get like fundamental Baptist people, but they didn't believe in all the supernatural stuff.
Right.
So they would be rigid, legalistic, on a little bit more of an intellectual plane.
Right.
These fundamental, Bible believing Baptist kind of people. But then I'd get these fundamental, legalistic Pentecostals in, and they were a little different because they still thought God was speaking to them fresh off the God thing. And so like they would come to me they would tell me what God told me. Like they would tell me what God told them to tell me.
Right.
So like I'd be like, they knew exactly how God wanted me to lead the church.
Absolutely.
And they would give me like memos hot off the plate from God, what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to lead the church.
Yeah.
And some of it was pure insanity. And along the way, I'm just going, you just think every one of your thoughts is God speaking to you. And then if I don't obey it,
I'm disobeying.
I'm disobeying God. I had people leave my church and because I didn't obey them, because what they were telling me was from God.
Yeah.
And it was just their brain.
Right.
And I had some people say, God's written Ichabod all over this place. Like, the glory has departed is this Hebrew word Ichabod.
And they're like, as soon as you went to rehab, they're like, see?
Yeah, I mean,
see?
29 years later, I proved their point, right? We knew it just took 29 years for him to fall apart, but it
did. It was things like that as I became more knowledgeable in things of science. The thing about evolution, I didn't understand evolution. I didn't understand it. So typically the things you don't understand or if you can't conceive it, then you don't believe it. If it's something that you can't understand, then it's surely not true.
Yeah.
Well, I was so indoctrinated in the evangelical fundamental way, I was able to do the backflips and make sense of things, even though they clearly didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's confirmation bias. I was able to just, the things that now I look back, honestly, Fred, at some of the things I believe, and I just shake my head. I'm like, I honestly believed that. Like, I believed that only Christians that, confessed Jesus with their mouth and believed in their heart, Lord, those were the only people going to heaven, and every other kind, caring, wonderful person was going to go to hell. Which I think
even
is
the people who never heard,
right?
Even the people who came way before Jesus, even the people.
And all the Neanderthals, they're all burning in hell for sure, right? That I couldn't accept that anymore, and the thought of like a Ted Bundy who apparently gave his heart to Christ before he died. So that dude is in heaven, and then the kind, caring, loving Hindu that was my neighbor that never hurt a flea and was just so wonderful. They're in hell? I cannot go down this path anymore. I cannot be a part of this belief system. I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because you still have a spirituality of some type.
Yeah.
And so for example, so I pray all the time. I trained myself to pray. I can't.
Yeah. You pray without ceasing.
I really kind of do, whether it's just my crazy mind or brain or whatever, but I've always kind of integrated it with this thought that I'm praying. And so anyway, I'm thinking, but one thing I've gotten into is mindfulness meditation.
Yeah.
Which is way more about recognizing all these thoughts and feelings that I have. And I've had a lot of trauma these last few years, and being aware of my fear, my sadness, my grief, my anger, this without judging, being open, curious, receiving the moment, trying to be grateful, moving into a self-awareness that's self-compassionate, that's this, that, and the other. I remember one podcast I did with you, you had a Buddhist friend there with us, and I think we might have dialogued a little bit about this, but my prayer now, I do a lot more centering prayer, and sort of listening to my own self with compassion, openness, kindness, and what's going on in my body, my brain, and all that kind of stuff. Have you found some spiritual practices that have helped you, that you've found, because you're still going to church? You still pray? Yeah, I still pray, and By the way,
you've got to listen to an interview I did with Frank
Schaeffer.
Okay.
His dad was Francis Schaeffer.
Yeah, why does that sound so familiar?
Famous evangelical in the 70s. But Frank, just like, he's a lot like you. He wrote a book called Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God.
Wow, yeah.
He says, on some days I'm more of an atheist and some days I'm more of a believer. He left the evangelical world, but he goes to a Greek Orthodox church and he prays all the time. Yeah. But he thinks most of the time he feels like an atheist. So, so
that's interesting.
He's really a great author, and be a fun guy for you'd like him. But when you describe yourself, made me think of my interviews with Frank. And
I find
what spiritual practices have you found?
Yeah, I find the practices, even of the going to church and involving myself in the community of like-minded people, in the sense of that are about goodness and kindness and faith and all that kind of stuff. So I would say I'm like you. I kind of pray without ceasing. I'm just always in a meditative-ish space where I'm thinking, and I'll even put stuff out there like, universe, God, whatever, give me wisdom, help me make good decisions, help me see the truth. And, I'm always praying those kind of things. But I'm not praying them to a God that I think is going to be like, oh, okay, well, now I'll give you that. It's more of just aligning myself. It's almost like it's all about just aligning myself with a better nature, a better self. But I do choose to believe in some kind of a God or a supreme being of some sort. Like that does, for me, it makes sense. Even the idea of the universe just coming out of nothing, and we just came out of nothing. I'll be honest, that is a struggle for me to believe that like you and I are just came out of the ground, and now we can talk and think and pontificate, and I don't know, and maybe that is the way it is. I don't know, but it would make sense to me that if somehow we found out that there's a supreme being, even if it was I would even openly admit that I would be okay if there was another species, another intelligent that seeded this planet with life. Like, oh, okay.
I had a Jewish guy one time. I was flying to Israel. And I study Hebrew. I had my Hebrew Bible open, and we got in a conversation. He was an Israeli guy, and he was an MD, a doctor. Okay. He's an atheist. And when we went, he opened it up and read, about God making man in his own image. He says, I think these were aliens who came to our planet and basically did a, what do you call it when you replicate?
Yeah,
I'm blanking.
A re-engineering kind of a thing, or
like cloned.
Oh, cloned. Yeah, got you.
Cloned humans.
Yes,
and then that's what started the planet off. Was
that if that was found out to be true, I'd be like, well, that explains it.
So we were cloned in the image of God, or the image of some being,
right?
Something. And this is what he literally. This is like going, I never even heard of that. So there's just so many different streams of thought that flow around those kinds of things.
There's a scripture that
when I think about, like, kids would come to me and ask, like, where did God come from?
Yeah.
And, your answer would be like, well, Timmy,
right.
God's just always existed. But if you were atheist raising your kids, at some point, wouldn't they think, like, where did matter come from?
Right.
Where did anything come from?
And that's an argument, that's a valid argument that atheists have against creationists. That's okay, if something so great with such precision had to be created, fine. Well, who created God? And that's a great question. That's an honest question, because if you're using the same principles in that discussion, that you can't have something so great without there being a creator, okay, fine. Well, who created this great creator?
How does anything exist rather than nothing? It's basically the beginnings of the beginning of the beginning, and how far back?
What do they say? It's turtles all the way down, or whatever.
That's an ancient story, right?
Yeah. So I really do find comfort in maintaining some of these, and maybe it's just because I was always raised in it, and so it gives me some tethering to a thing that I know. But at the end of the day, I'm there's things that are beautiful, there's things that are lovely, there's love, there's human love and connection and the beauty of that. There's things in nature that are so outstandingly gorgeous, and obviously there's things in nature that are terribly destructive and hideous, survival of the fittest kind of stuff. But then most of your modern evolutionists are saying for survival of the friendliest, because as you study out the species that survive and live and all that, they've learned to cooperate and love and support each other. That's fascinating.
So
I've never heard that.
New evolution is survival of the friendliest.
That makes sense.
It helps us to begin to push into love and inclusion, radical love and inclusion. And my friend Frank Schaefer thinks that Jesus was kind of ahead of his time with that vision of radical inclusion instead of exclusion.
Right.
Instead of tribalism and exclusion and killing everybody and everybody else is your enemies except your tribe, that actually we're all one big family and we need to include everybody. And
we're all human, part of the human race.
Web of love and life that survives only through love and friendliness. It's just kind of fascinating to think about.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with Carl Sagan.
Of course.
And one of his, what's called the Blue Dot, you can Google it and find it, but the Blue Dot little speech that he gave, just about we're an insignificant planet in an insignificant corner of a galaxy in a vast, unbelievably large universe with billions and billions of galaxies and billions of planets and billions of Earth-like planets. That's wild. So when you think of excess and that, we're the only thing that matters, God focuses on us, and then you kind of learn about the universe, or that 98.8% of all species that have ever lived have gone extinct. What's the purpose in that? What was their purpose? That's fascinating. Not to mention the 7 other human species that went extinct. Fascinating. Did God, were they not the apple of God's eye? Like, did they not matter to God apparently? And
so, that's, when I fell apart, it's so interesting because, I had pastored people through their dark crises for years and years and years. And when I went through mine, it really felt like I had been abandoned. And then I was full of shame, from some from my own fault, and then some from created, by the community I was a part of. But I had enough of my own, it's just literally hating myself. And just in that dark place, it just questioned everything. And if so many people wanted me to just snap back and be like, evangelical, kind Pastor Fred again. And I still love Jesus. I still love I've been teaching the Bible.
You're one of the greatest teachers I've ever heard.
I still love all that stuff, but I did question everything, and I felt like an atheist. And then as I've emerged, I still have lots of questions. I think I have way more questions than I have answers. Sometimes just better questions.
Yeah.
I'm less certain, more open, but I still love Jesus, his life, his teaching, and there's still things in the Bible that I love, and I'm still learning and growing, and so I remain open and learning and growing, but there's still a part of me that feels like the God that I related to for so long and felt so close to hasn't felt the same.
Yeah.
In these last 3 or 4 years for me. It's been more of a silence. And you've heard of things like dark night of the soul,
right,
and all that kind of stuff. And who knows? Maybe that's what I'm going through. It could very well be. But one of my friends said, there's a silence that's comforting and peaceful. Like, be still and know, whatever, But then there's a silence that feels like abandonment.
Yeah.
Like you're forsaken.
Yeah.
And like Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then verse 2 says, I cried out to you and you did not answer.
Yeah.
So the doubts and the questions and the disbelief, this is one of the things. I love evangelicals. I grew up, my family, everything, all the people that I love and pastor and all that kind of stuff. I've tried to live openly with my doubts, questions, and disbelief. Maybe that's a mistake.
Yeah. It is a difficult land.
It's where I've been at. And when I look at Bible characters, honestly.
Yeah. They did too. Even Jesus. Yeah.
Is quoting Psalm 22, which is one of the darkest Psalms you could quote.
Yeah. I feel like people want you to be certain.
Exactly.
And one of my uncertainty really unsettled people.
It does.
But oddly, uncertainty gave me certainty. I can't explain that. I don't know why, but I felt super lonely in my transition when I was leaving evangelical and becoming more agnostic. It was a dark time just because I lost a lot of friends. There's a lot of friends that just, they won't have anything to do with me. They think I'm a prodigal, I've left the faith, and some are still praying that I'll come back. And I'm like, you don't understand. I don't feel lost. I'm not lost. I mean, I know what you think, because I know how you think. I used to think that way, but I just don't look at it that way.
Yeah. But I felt lost, like I did.
Yeah.
In the dark. And I've described it like this. I lost my sense of belonging because the church that I'd pastored for 29 years was gone.
Yeah.
I lost my sense of identity because I'd been a pastor since I was 16.
Yeah.
I lost my sense of faith because I didn't know what the heck I believed anymore. And so in that sense, the feeling that I had was like, I felt like lost.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And I used to try to get lost people saved, and then, and then now I'm like going, I feel lost, but then I've just tried to be honest about that. And some of my spiritual values would be honesty, vulnerability, and humility.
Yeah.
And I think with humility comes that less certain, more open, and becoming comfortable with paradox, mystery, uncertainty, and even unknowing.
Yeah.
And I think a faith that's not been examined maybe isn't all that great of a faith anyway, right?
No. There is a verse that I just absolutely love, and it says that, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. I've always loved that verse. I love that verse more today than I've ever loved it, because I don't look at truth as, the Bible truth. No. Like truth. Like, what is really actually true, right? Like, if God sent Jesus to die if that's actually true, cool. Mm-hmm. But what if that's not true? What if that's just a misunderstanding? What if there's mythical parts of that story? Some of it's factual, some of it's mythical. What if, and you have to ask those questions,
Yeah. So, how we memorize verses all those years, and, have all those verses memorized and everything. And my newest verse that I memorized, like just recently, is
Jesus wept.
No. 1 John 4. This is a legit verse. Okay.
Yeah.
1 John 4, I think it's 7. For 6 or 7, somewhere in there. God is love. Those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, now that's
beautiful. Yeah.
Like, what if we just camped out there? What if that was our main verse?
Yeah.
And all the whole Bible.
That would sure help.
What if we just landed right there?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful place to
Absolutely.
land. How could you ever go wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
You know. Well, man, so much fun.
Yeah.
So tell me what's out. What's your future? Tell people how they can listen to your podcast and
Sure.
check you out online, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can just Google me, Timmy Gibson. My website's timmygibson.com. My show is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. It's the Timmy Gibson Show. And we record weekly. We do dating, love, relationships, and spirituality. We kind of cover those three topics. I have a co-host, Pammy Nicholson, that comes on and helps me. And I recently got engaged. I'll be getting married next year in April.
Yay!
Yeah, Jessica Gray. She's precious, man. I'll tell you, I posted this on Facebook. I said, as an agnostic, I don't believe in a personal God. I said, but meeting this girl has made me rethink that. And I mean, that wasn't true totally, but it was a little bit true just because, and like you, as a single person, I was fine being single, but I did long for a companionship and man, if the universe, God, whatever, didn't have me cross paths with someone that was just absolutely wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I feel very, very lucky or blessed, whatever.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So and I'm in the wedding business. That's what I do full time. Do a lot of weddings.
So if any of you need a wedding,
efficient.
You don't want me, then get.
Yeah. You want to join my team?
Well,
I probably pay you more than you get paid on your own.
Well, funny thing is like as the church grew, and I was the lead pastor, everybody wanted me to do their weddings.
Of course,
but
right.
I couldn't.
Right.
I did Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night services. So if they wanted me to do it, they typically had to get married on a Thursday or Friday or something like that, not a Saturday. Well, of course, the brunt of people, they want to get married on a Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Or Sunday, but not another day.
Not Thursday.
Yeah. So I really ended up, as the church grew larger, I didn't do most of the weddings. I would do the weddings for the people who had been there the longest.
Or staff.
My friends, family, staff, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I still get asked occasionally.
Yeah. I've seen your post.
That pops up in my that grew up in my church, like they want me to do a wedding for them. That's I'll do it. But excellent. So TimmyGibson.com.
Yep.
Gibson.
Yes.
All right. And they can follow you on Facebook.
Facebook, Instagram. I'm not much of a Twitter. Mm-hmm. I tweet once in a blue moon, but I'm not much on there. But I am on there.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks for coming. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. We'll see you next time.
Peace.
This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.